Welcome to Law Subscribed. This is your dedicated news source for all things subscriptions in the law. My name is Matthew Kurbis. I'm the subscription attorney, and I believe subscriptions can help bridge the access to justice gap and incentivize attorneys to modernize and scale their practice like never before. On this show, I interview lawyers ditching the billable hour and experts who can help attorneys move beyond billing time. Thanks to my sponsors, 650 and Gavel. Links to both in the show notes. More on them later, and use the code LAWSUBSCRIBED when signing up. You get 10% off, and it supports the show. The best way to support the show is to share it with someone you know. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and nothing said is legal, ethical, or financial advice. Without further delay, here's the episode. I'm thrilled to have with me today another attorney cut from the same cloth, Marc Snyderman. Welcome to the podcast Law Subscribed.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
So I found out about you through the Lawline podcast, Lawyers Who Lead, which at the time of publication of this episode, my episode will probably be live, though at the time of recording, I haven't been on the show yet, but you've been on the show, and I'm usually the first lawyer on a podcast that's talking about the subscription model, and I'm actually happy I'm not going to be the first guest that they have that's talking about ditching billing time and all that. So go ahead and just give a little introduction for my audience, if you won't mind.
Sure. I like to say that I'm kind of a hybrid of a business attorney and a businessman. My career's kind of spanned both, because I started out as a corporate securities lawyer in Manhattan, went in-house after about 18 months, and then spent 5 years in-house at one of the cable companies back in the late 90s, early 2000s when they were all going public. And then ended up at a engineering and IT services firm that did mostly work for the Department of Defense, and ended up being the COO of that company for about 10 years. Mm-hmm. So I grew that company, ran that company. I was also the general counsel, so I gave myself advice, which was just awesome. You know, it's nothing like being able to answer some questions and say yes. So, and then I decided to leave there and start a private practice. And and I started the practice with the intent that I wanted to try to fix some things that I saw wrong with the legal profession, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I have the podcast, right? So that's why I'm so glad to have you here. The company now is Outside General Counsel Solutions, or OGC, which is a nice branding. I gotta say, I'm always a sucker for good branding. And even the OG thing, depending on who your potential, clients are.
That's like, right.
You're the OG.
We're the OG
counsel.
Yeah.
So I mean, right on your, it doesn't necessarily say subscription, but right on your website, it says fixed and predictable cost.
Yeah.
Right. So like, this is one of these things that. But fractional legal needs is like, this is key. This is the term that's been blowing up even outside of legal, fractional HR, fractional CFO, fractional legal. Why not? Why can't that work too? So with your business background, though, I'm curious to know, like how did you come to this model as a way to conduct?
Yeah. It's interesting.
Services?
I'll give you the story of why when I was leaving and looking at, the landscape and saying, I was leaving the company. I was like, well, what am I going to do? I knew I wanted to do some entrepreneurial ventures. I had some investments I was making, but I was like, well, I got to make money. And, I'm a lawyer. I can always hang a shingle and try to do some of this again. It's been a long time since I was in private practice, but I could figure this out. And, when I set up the shop, I was basically like, well, what's wrong with the profession right now? Because, I had been hiring a lot of attorneys as a GC. I hired a lot of outside firms that come in and do work. They were charging a fortune. And all I kept saying was, well, any client I really want to work with is going to be small and medium-sized businesses. How are they going to afford this? And what's missing? So I use this one story as an example. So when I first started practicing, you're in the late 90s, we had all fashion clients. We were in the garment district, and, it was just an interesting time. And we had a really big client. Jill Stewart was the brand. She's a phenomenal brand. And she was looking for a new store down in Soho. And she called the senior partner and me and asked us to come down and negotiate the lease and look at the space with her. And I remember thinking, when I was going to start the firm, would anybody actually call their attorney to come look at space and negotiate a lease on site? And I kept thinking to myself, nobody's going to do that. There's no, you couldn't afford to do that. It makes no sense.
Right.
But the differential in negotiating at the site and actually not negotiating until there's already a lease drawn up and you've been handed it is like, it's an extreme difference in what the value you can add.
Right.
And I said, how can I get to a point where that's something that somebody would do with me? And that's when I thought about, well, if I made it subscription and they didn't have to think about it, you would put yourself in a position where they would say, that's somebody that would add value to me. I'm going to call them and have them come with me. And
Right.
it took 5 years because nobody was actually moving spaces but none of my clients were actually moving. The first client that was moving space, I never said a word to them. They picked up the phone and called me and said, hey, we're moving space. Can you meet us at this building? We're going to look at a couple spaces. Can you come with us and talk to the landlords? So it does work.
Yeah. Yeah. I've never been asked to go to a site. I don't know that I would be able to offer that because the prices I'm charging are so low that like I got to be at my desk to do the work and to
Yeah.
do all that stuff. But some of my earliest work when I went solo about 2 years ago at time of recording was lease work for
Okay.
small
Yeah.
businesses that, they would have never hired a lawyer at the billable hour. I don't know if they've ever hired a lawyer before. I was like the first lawyer they've ever hired to help them
Yeah.
with these commercial leases. I was representing the tenant. And it's just one of these things where I really help them dodge a lot of bullets because these landlords just
Yeah.
take advantage of unsophisticated parties, right?
Of
Um,
course.
yeah, yeah, but that's a need. I think there's serious need there. And if one of my higher ticket paying subscribers clients would ask me to come look at another space with them, oh, absolutely, I will be
Yeah.
there, right? I will definitely be there. I think that's a great example. Though it still begs the question, Mark. I have to wear my journalist hat sometimes, and that is
Sure.
like still though, like did you have a dream and you were like subscriptions the way? Was the business that you were in house at was that a subscription business? Like still, why subscription? Like how did
No,
you
the,
come
the
to
the
that?
business that I was in was really a T&M business. I mean, it was, I guess the best phrase is ass in seats, right? It's,
Right,
we were a government contractor, right? You're putting people in the government seats and they're doing the work.
right. So
It's all
so
T&M kind of work.
did you read books, listen to podcasts? You said you were an investor. Were you investing in SaaS companies? Like how did you come to the
SaaS was
subscription?
definitely the model that I was looking at, right? And saying it's, I think there's a fractional, there's a use of fractional resources that everybody can use. And especially, it's when I started, I started 2016 or 2017, 2016, I think is when I started the firm. And it really was that time when you started to look at and say, where are people putting their money? What are they buying? And everybody was starting to buy SaaS products, but nobody really knew what that meant, right? You were kind of buying them and just kind of willy nilly saying, hey, this one's $40 a month. This one's $100 a month, whatever it is. And I just kept thinking there was a way to do legal like a startup. The first piece was it has to be done like a startup. You have to crush out the overhead.
Mhm.
You have to go to virtual, and if not virtual, you can have an office, but it can't be an office, right? It's got to be like just a
Right.
room, right? Where you can store some files and have some stuff. And nobody really cares. And it was pre COVID, but still the same concept. My concept was always if I can get clients that wanted to work with me and were willing to pay a monthly fee, I'd rather go to the client's site and spend a day there a week or every other week, a half a day. I would tell clients when I first started, just give me a conference room and I'll come in for a half a day on Wednesday. And they said, well, do you want to set up meetings? I said, no, I don't want to set up any meetings. I just want to be at your office. I want to
Yeah.
be there and I want to talk because I'll walk around and people will talk to me and I'll get to know the HR people and I'll get to know the accounting people. And then what's going to happen is they're going to call me and you're not going to care that they're calling me directly because it's all in the monthly fee.
Right.
Right. And that's the differential. Right. And it's getting it, you would say to the CEO or the COO, you're going to get it out of your hands. Right now, the only person who will touch legal is you because you can't afford to let anybody else do it because you don't know what's going to happen. The
Yeah.
fees
And,
are
and
too crazy.
And what I've even come to find is there are things that come up with these, you know, larger business, but like small, when you're looking at businesses like
Yeah.
that have HR departments and accounting departments, you might be looking at, almost 100 or over 100 person company.
Right.
So still a small company, maybe compared to, Microsoft and Apple, but
Exactly.
a lot of people. And so what I find is for like the executives, the CEO, who's usually the one who's hiring us, outside counsel, they, they're not even worried about some of the things that the HR department are bringing to us. Like, some employee got sued personally when it should have been the company, kind of a thing. Like that,
Yeah,
the CEO doesn't want to worry about something like that. The C-suite executives, they don't care. But like, one part of the value that we're able to provide is now the VP of HR doesn't need to go to the execs about it. The other execs,
exactly.
they come right to us, and that's the value. But maybe like, how do you handle then? How have you handled like maybe like letting the CEO, like letting the person who's looking at the monthly legal fee going out, yeah, I handled all these things for HR. Yeah, I'm not going to bother you
hmm
with it, obviously, right? It's like, how have you handled those kinds of things?
I mean, they're actually pretty natural conversations, I would say, with the CEO that, let me do what I do and let me help your people, and they're going to be happy. And you can get all the feedback you need from them on how I helped out and what I did. And if you want me to talk to you about it, I will. But, you can have these internal conversations are going to pop up, and, they get to say, hey, I talked to Mark and he fixed that thing for the one employee. It was really, really helpful.
Yeah.
And you didn't have to deal with it. Right. But you look like a hero because you brought me in.
Yeah. So I really want to unpack like how you got started, because
Yeah.
we have a lot of listeners who skew not necessarily younger, but like less experienced, because we have non-traditional attorneys who like didn't go to law school right out of college. Maybe they
Okay.
had another career, but they're still like young lawyers, right? They're still like
Yeah.
less experienced lawyers, and maybe they want to go solo, where they want to start a subscription practice inside their firm, or something like that. So that's what I want to try to unpack. So at least on LinkedIn, it says you've been doing it for 7 years. Is that when you
Yeah.
started? When you went,
Yeah.
you started right
Yeah.
away
I
with the
started the
subscription
firm,
model?
but when I started, it started out as Snyderman Law Group,
Hmm.
which was me, and I brought in an associate who was my former deputy general counsel. I brought her over, and we started out together, just the two of us, with an ops person kind of support. And we started out as subscription or fixed fee, nothing else. We
Yeah.
weren't doing everything. If it wasn't a subscription, it had to be a fixed fee. And my goal was really that that's all I would ever do.
Mhm.
Obviously, I merged the firm last year into OGC Solutions, and, they're a much bigger practice. There's 20 attorneys. There's a lot of litigation work. There's, work that doesn't really fit in the model, right? But the corporate side work and the OGC work, we're still maintaining it as full subscription. So there is some billable hour work that I have to do now. Mergers and
Oof.
acquisitions are really hard to do on a true fixed price. We're kind of doing T&M not to exceed. We're trying to figure it out. We haven't gotten quite there yet, but on the
Yeah.
day to day, monthly kind of the day to day service, we have that down.
Yeah, I was asked on some podcast, I can't remember which one it was. It might have been one of the Answering Legal ones. I've been on a lot of their podcasts lately, but it was some question around like if attorneys want to like stop billing time, and how do they like convince, the other stakeholders at the firm to do subscription?
Yeah,
And I said it's going to be a heck of a lot easier to just leave and go start your own thing. like,
yeah,
like at the
yeah.
end of
It,
the
it
day,
would be. It is a hard thing to explain to traditional legal, and honestly, if the firm's too big, it can't really pivot and do it.
yeah.
Because if you're not going to use a whole lot of tools, and you're going to staff up the way lawyers typically like to staff up, the subscription model is going to be really, really difficult to handle.
Right. I mean, look, the way that I approach M&A transactions, because I don't bill at all, because it's just me, is I have a subscription add-on. And for me,
Okay.
since my transactions are usually less than $1 million, right? So like,
Yeah.
there's not a lot of due diligence. In fact, like I'll only do the due diligence on the contracts that are coming over anyway, and letting my client know, because at least at this stage of my career, I'm representing more buyers than sellers. So
Right.
I'll let my buyer client, know some of the obligations. Do we actually want to acquire that or not? And there are very few types of contracts. Like with like UPS franchises, it's like, okay, the Konica printer lease,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. Like there's
Yeah.
not a lot of due diligence.
Simple stuff. Yeah.
So at least right now on my website, it's like an $800 a month add-on fee. So whichever
Okay.
level they're subscribed at, but I require my premier level subscribe. I require $100 a month minimum to get access to
Yeah.
that subscription add-on. So my $20 a month subscribers don't get access to that, because what the $100 a month subscribers get with me, the premier subscribers, is they're getting access to all of my calendar to schedule calls with me, because we're going to need more time to chat with each other, more availability to get this transaction done. So really, I'm making $900 a month on an M&A transaction that, might last from 3 to 6 months. So like, it's not a
Yeah.
huge thing. They know exactly what it's going to cost. It's pretty profitable for me. And my client's getting a heck of a lot of work. And I could tell you with certainty when I was billing time, I would make twice as much money. But after they buy that business, I want them to stay subscribed with me. And so
Exactly.
I'm
Yeah.
looking long term. I could charge twice as much on a flat or recurring basis. And I know that it's reasonable because I used to charge that when I was billing time. But for me, just doing that temporary subscription add-on, as soon as the M&A negotiations start, with that letter of intent, boom, that's we're going to start that $800 a
Hmm.
month on top of it. And as soon as we hit the closing table, it's done. So it's a temporary subscription add-on. That's how I've been handling the M&A transaction.
Interesting. That's interesting. I like the concept.
Yeah, I mean,
And for the smaller deals, the less than $1 million deals makes a lot of sense because they're pretty cookie cutter overall.
yeah, but even with
There's
like,
always wrinkles, right? But
yeah,
you're in the business. That's
well, if
always
it
say
takes
like, the
longer,
difference.
if it takes longer, then you're still getting the 800 a month or whatever it
Yeah.
is, commensurate with that type of transaction. So if things are more complicated and it takes longer, you're still making more money because it's going to take another month for you to get it done.
Right.
And something else I found, because I interview a lot of people on the show, and in particular, Marc Snyderman with Impact Pricing made some really good suggestions on a couple of deals that like I had structured some unique pricing. And extrapolating from that, plus this M&A thing. So if I'm doing a multi-million-dollar M&A transaction, I'm thinking maybe I charge whatever it is, X amount a month, but also there's a closing success fee, and it
Hmm.
goes down as time goes on because you want to
Yeah.
incentivize to get to the
Yeah, you want
closing
to incentivize
table.
the close. Yeah.
And then so certainly you could have something in the engagement that says, maybe even after so many months the monthly fee goes down to incentivize the closing, because you want to align incentives between attorney and client, right? But there should be, I think there's ways to do a combined subscription plus flat fee that you could totally ditch the billable hour
Yeah.
even on those complicated M&A transactions.
I like the value based, billing. I like the concept of it a lot. Really interesting.
Yeah, but you got to get the other people on board, the partners at the
Yeah.
firm now, right? To something like
Yeah.
that, and show them how with AI tools you could get to the end result a heck of a lot faster to analyze, like legal trained AI, which I've had a lot of guests on my show now who are
Yeah.
founding those types of companies. I'm using them as a first pass, just as a first pass. I'm not relying 100% on them, but you could probably get to the closing table faster with these AI tools as they get better and better. They're the worst they're ever going to be. And when you switch over to this value-based pricing, you can make more money in less time. And why not?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think you hit it right on the head. I mean, you can't be afraid of the tech that's coming. You got to adopt it, and you got to be able to say, I'm going to go down this path. I'm going to adopt it. If it's getting you, I mean, it's 80-20 rule. If it got you 80% there, you're in a phenomenal place, right?
Especially when you're not billing time.
Yeah, you're in a
'Cause it'll get you
phenomenal
there
place.
faster.
Yeah.
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 So Marc, just throwing it out there, 6 months from now, a year from now, we'll have you back on the show and see how it's gone
Yeah.
with trying to
Yeah.
move the partners over to that. But then let's still stay focused then on before you merged. I'm curious to know, even back then, I mean, there
Yeah.
was pretty good automation tech back then, but you hadn't had your own practice before. You weren't even, traditionally practicing law.
Nope.
Like, where did you go? How the heck did you get started, dude? Did you Google it? Did you go to a CLE? Like, what were the resources you went to figure out how to do this thing?
I kind of just did it. I'm going to be honest with you. I just did it. I didn't really read up on any of it. I kind of figured, I think I bought one of those, how do you start your own law firm books? And, it tells you the normal stuff. And then I was like, okay, I had a good list of what I was going to need tools wise. And I said, well, if I have these tools and, I had built a good business and had a good reputation for building the business that I built, and figured in the industry, I could go pull a couple clients, and I pulled a couple clients, and kind of just grew from there. We hit or miss with a lot of stuff. I mean, we were trying, so, in terms of, trying to go out and market and how are we going to get more clients and what were we going to go after, you swing and miss a bunch of times, but, I got on to some, I think the one place I got one really good client was, I was doing volunteer work for Bunker Labs. I had come out of DOD work, so I'm always looking for veterans. Anytime I can support veterans, those are charities that I want to be involved in. Bunker Labs does, veteranpreneurs, right? So veteran entrepreneurs trying to support them. And I got onto a panel, and the panel happened to be with, you know, it was all the big firms in Philly and me. And, it was great for me. Didn't
Yeah.
work out well for them, worked out great for me. Because, they're sitting there trying, people are like, okay, that's great. You can do all this, but how do I afford you? And then they come up with their, well, if you use our startup package, and we raise funds, you won't have to pay us until after the funds are raised. And I said, then you're going to take 40% of the raise. And what do they have left?
Yeah, it's
And
like
looked at me like, how dare you say that?
yeah, yeah. I mean, look, long time seed or early angel investors know like all their money's going to legal, like to
Yeah.
get things set up,
Yeah.
right? So it's just one of those things where what if it didn't have to, right? Now,
It
like
doesn't
imagine
have to.
how much quicker you could scale that business.
Yeah. It was,
Um,
if that's why I was like, whenever I do, like, I do some angel investing and advisory work, I'll do the legal for free.
yeah,
I pick up their legal work for free because it's, I'm just helping my own investment, right? I don't leave my money going anywhere else, but, you know, to where it should go, which is tech and people and marketing.
yeah, yeah. And look, there's a company called Hey Counsel, and I know they've pivoted a few times, but at least the original
Okay.
conceit was connect lawyers with startups to give them equity in exchange.
Yeah.
But you're getting equity because you're actually investing in them and you're also doing
Yeah.
the legal work for them. So
Yeah.
this is a thing that like lawyers can ethically, I mean, I know there's a bunch of check boxes you got to check,
Yeah.
but they
Yeah.
could ethically, in exchange for equity in a startup, like do the
Yeah.
original legal stuff.
And,
So,
and they
mhm,
should be doing it. I
yeah,
mean, if you're not taking those kind of, opportunities that are available in the market these days, you're missing out. If you're a business lawyer and you're not going to take on, some startups to help out, why would you not do that? There's people that put, millions on the street doing this. You don't have to put millions on the street. Just put some time into it.
right. Right. Lawyers have that
And it's
unique
very rewarding
opportunity.
work.
Yeah.
I also happen to think it's some of the most rewarding work I get to do.
Yeah.
You're mentoring, you're in a position to mentor and help a business that's just getting started. It could be young, it could be older, doesn't matter, but they need help.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned the getting clients thing, and I want to dive in a little bit more on that because
Yeah.
it's one of these through lines where if you're in private practice, it doesn't matter what your business model is, and it doesn't matter what technology you're using or all these things or how big or small you are, you got to get the clients, right? It's like the number
Yep.
one through line. Now that changes a lot depending on your business model and stuff. Like you just gave a great example of how since you were and you're not necessarily going for cheap prices, but you were clearly the most affordable or at least most predictably priced attorney on that panel that of course they're going with you. So distinguishing yourself on price is one of those ways you could do it when you have a unique business model like we do.
Hmm.
But that only applies in particular what I found to institutional clients who are used to paying billable time, right? Or they
Right.
understand the unknowns around that and how it can be really, really expensive. And even sometimes they'd be willing to end up paying the same amount. They just want to know how much they're going to pay before they pay you. But have you found that it's been easier to sell these institutional clients, or have you been able to capture clients who maybe have never hired a lawyer before? This latent legal market, this blue ocean, serving them.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the blue ocean's opened up a lot more since, with 4 or 5 years worth of content that I put out.
Mm-hmm.
I put out a significant amount of content on LinkedIn. Like there's 45-second videos of me pretty much every day,
Wow.
right? Not that's not a joke. There's pretty much one every day that goes up. And it costs me money and it costs me a lot of time to invest in doing all that content generation. A lot of it is because I think there's just a need for, some pragmatic legal and business advice that's really straightforward, that isn't BS. And as you can tell, I'm not really one to do that. That's not really the way I am. But it has opened up like people that have never hired an attorney, and they hear me talk and they say, you're really think differently than other attorneys that we've seen or that we think about when we think about attorneys.
Yeah. Well, let me know if you want your people to get a recording of like this recording.
Yeah.
If there's anything they find useful to chop up and put on LinkedIn, I'm happy to share it with them.
Yeah. I'm
So
sure they will.
let me know, even though it's more for a lawyer audience, but I'm sure
Yeah,
there's things you've said that will be useful for your LinkedIn. Why not double, triple dip if you can, right?
exactly. Yeah, you
Um,
have to.
Yeah, for volunteering though, even going back to that, I have found that I volunteer on 4 local boards in my community. And like I'm a
Yeah.
virtual law firm. I could help people anywhere in the state of Illinois. But or I've even had clients transacting in Illinois from outside the state. But like these volunteer organizations have brought in a lot of money to my firm
Yeah.
and I'm like not even marketing there. I'm just involved with things I care about. I mean, one of them is the Chamber of Commerce, right? So that's sort of
Yeah.
everyone's there to get business. But just doing things that you're passionate about, that you enjoy, that
Yeah.
you want to put good back into the world. I think that I just want to highlight that not only does it sound like it's worked for you, but it's working for me too. And so these are not the things that you think of when you think of traditional business development for a law firm, right? Um, are there any other things like what else are you doing? Obviously, the video content is huge. I listened to Lauren Lester's podcast, A Different Practice, and she's a friend of the show. And she just had an episode that went live yesterday or today, all about
Hmm.
how you need to do video for your law firm. It's like the best
Yeah,
way
you do.
to get lead generation. So you're obviously doing that. That seems to be working for you. Like what else are you doing, especially in the early days? What did you do to get those clients? I particularly want to know the misses. They might be just unique to you, but if we could
Yeah.
learn from them and avoid them,
I would say, I thought networking I thought you had to go to all the networking events, right? I thought the networking events would be really big and would be really good for me. And, I'm in the Philadelphia, there's a lot of stuff around here, a lot of events. And I found that, you would go to them, you'd meet, 30, 40 people, you get 30, 40 business cards. You have, 10 of those become a coffee or a lunch or something. And and you find out that none of them are decision makers and they're all just, they're all technically BD people and it's a complete and utter waste of time.
yeah.
Like I wasted a lot of time doing those kind of events when I found that the best way to do it was really hand to hand, one on one, call people that and literally go meet them for coffee and say, here's what I'm doing. Anybody that you think would be an interesting, intro for me. I'd really appreciate it. And I do a very good job of, connecting dots for other people. I make it a very big point to make sure that I have a really strong network. I think building your spheres of influence is super important, right? So do you have accountants? They're not, and look, some of them are not very good referral partners. Accountants, insurance brokers, they tend to be terrible referral partners. Like they won't send anything back to you, but you can send stuff to them all day. But that's okay because building that pay it forward mentality will pay off in the end. And it won't come from them because it never does. But it comes from people knowing that you're the person that will always connect and do things. And they call you back because they say, oh, remember Mark actually helped me. He got me that person. He got me that person. And, so building that's a network that you have to build as a solo. And even in a firm, right? You need to have your group of people that you can refer out for whatever anybody comes up with. And that's part of the general counsel gig, right?
Right.
People call you because, people, right? And, oh, you're a trusted advisor. Even if you're not my trusted advisor, you're a trusted advisor to some people. And I need to know who do I call for this particular work. I have them. But that includes, everything down to graphic designers, web developers, you have some of everything that anybody could possibly need, have really good people around that you can refer out. And it definitely helps your brand.
When I went solo, I pivoted from mostly litigation to a transactional only practice. I did not have a database of documents to automate. That's why a business and employment legal document database and automation tool like 650 is super useful. I can rely on the quality of the documents in 650's database since they're putting excellent legal minds to work curating and updating their documents and automations over time. When you're not billing by the hour, outsourcing and efficiency matters, and 650 can help you scale your practice to get high quality documents drafted in less time. Use the code LAWSUBSCRIBED at 650.com and when being onboarded to get 10% off. If you're not a business and employment attorney or you have your own documents that you'd prefer to use, then my next sponsor, Gavel, is the automation tool for you. Gavel allows you to build shareable, client-facing workflow and document automations. In other words, Gavel helps you create a legal practice where attorneys can monetize the value they bring clients in productized form and scale via subscriptions and flat fees. Use the code LAWSUBSCRIBED at gavel.io to get 10% off an annual subscription. There's no one right way to automate and scale your practice, but with one or both of my sponsors, 650 and Gavel, you can take your subscription law firm to the next level. Links to both in the show notes. Now back to the show. Yeah. So Bill Jostin, who was on the podcast, who's with Thomson Reuters Institute, is really interested in the data. And one of the things we talked about on that episode, which should air before this one, is there's just not a lot of data on the subscription model and
Hmm.
alternative fees in general, like true alternative fees. There have been like hourly caps and like other sorts of
Right.
things, but that's not true alternative fees, right?
No,
So
not at all.
so so yeah. So anyway, we talked about the difficulties in it, and because there's not a lot of data. But like, this is anecdotal, but I'm going to corroborate another thing you just said, which was that like I got a really great client once, and again I've only been doing this for about 2 years now, having my own practice, that is, where I couldn't actually help them with their legal problem, but I found them an attorney who did, and it was a really good referral. And I got a great referral from that person because I did a good job in finding them the
Yeah,
right person to help them. Even though
that's
I didn't
great.
do no quality of work, like, they can't say he's a great attorney, he helped me solve my legal problem. They were just like, "I could rely on this person."
Yeah,
And that's all you need sometimes.
yeah, it is.
It
Yeah,
definitely so the sphere of influence thing it definitely works, and who you know and who you could connect your clients to, whether they're another attorney or an insurance person, financial person, whomever, huge, huge, can't be understated. Something else I want to get to, because I mean, time is just being burned away in this conversation. There's so much to cover. The technology, like, what was the
yeah.
technology like that you were using when you got started? What's
Oh
it like?
God.
What's it like now? And along the way, what were you using? I'm also curious to know,
Yeah,
like, specifically with the payments and powering the subscription, so you don't have to worry about account receivables. What were you
yeah.
doing?
So that was a whole thing for me when I first. So I mean, I started out just saying, okay, well, I'll just use QuickBooks and I'll figure it out. And it was just it was a mess, right? I couldn't really, I wasn't really even tracking to figure out profitability in the beginning, to be honest. I
Mhm.
kind of was just going after it and figuring, well, I can kind of gauge it on my own, how much I'm working, what I'm doing. And I wasn't really doing a lot of good numbers. Like you said, it's not a lot of data and I didn't have a good way to track it. So then I bought one of the legal practice management systems. I think it was Leap. And, they sold me on it. And I kept telling them, I'm like, look, it's not really set up right. I don't really think this is going to work very well for me. And they're like, no, look, we can do it this way and we'll help you implement. And, I spent a bunch of money on it, total waste of money for 3 years until my lease was up on it. And I gave it back to them and said, thank you very little. I didn't use this basically at all. It was really just, it really didn't work for me. The one thing that it led me to was LawPay, which is a great piece of software for sending out bills and tracking bills. And it integrates into QuickBooks. And that was my answer, right? That piece of software was really good. And then I tried to get into, then I was trying to do like front end onboarding. And there was a company out of Canada that I had a piece of software and I can't remember the name of it right now. But it was pretty good. Like they were trying to build out like, you would get a date, you would have a place to actually pull files in from clients and you could send files back in a secure platform. It was kind of clunky, but it worked mostly. And I kept thinking like that was kind of going to be the next stage of where I was going to go. And then but the firm that I merged into is a Salesforce platform, which is super interesting.
Mhm.
So they're using Salesforce with Avalogix and Accounting Seed and the Salesforce and a document management system that attaches in as well. And you get a lot of power out of it. Like it's still not, look, nothing is tailored to, a subscription model, right? Because it's just not, nobody's built it yet. No, because you're basically building, it's a strange build, right? Because you're talking about a matter managed, we're matter managed still, right? We still open matters for things, even though we're a subscription overall. So you're kind of jamming round pegs into square holes with any of the tech that's out there from
So,
my perspective.
yeah, I mean, two tech companies come to mind. Legal tech. I've had both of them
Yeah.
on the show, and in fact, we're going to have an episode recorded live at Tech Show with one of them again. But Fidu Legal, FIDU, like fiduciary,
Yeah.
they were founded by a subscription billing attorney, and so
Interesting.
they're still very early. I think they're only in like year 2 or 3, and they are built for subscription law firms first. Now, they've done a little bit of a pivot, and I'm excited to have this conversation with their founders, because there's just not a lot of attorneys who are looking for a subscription
Yeah.
based solution. So they also market like we power your flat fees too.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
they're like, they are the only one that says like, this is what we do, this is all we do, and their integration partner for payments is a LawPay competitor Confido Legal, which used to be Gravity Legal. And you could
Okay.
just
Yeah.
power,
I remember Gravity. Yeah.
yeah, you could power subscriptions right through there, which is really something. So if you just want just a payment solution, I know Confido lets you do that. I just use them for trust accounting purposes because I
Right.
already have another integration set up. And then Rally Legal, and Rally is the
Rally
company.
was the one that I was using that was the Canadian company that I was using.
Yeah, and they did Spellbook, which they is an AI based drafting tool. So that's what I
Okay.
think they've even rebranded their whole company to Spellbook because that tool
Okay.
took off. But yeah, but
Yeah.
they were the other ones who they while they didn't necessarily do a lot of advertising, I knew that on this aspect of it, they did have on their website, if you want to do a subscription law firm,
Yeah.
we can have that for you, the client portal and everything. And what I found with both these tools, because I demoed both of them, is there's less of a focus on matter management because when you're looking at lifetime value with your clients, it's more like this is your client for life, and they will have a lease, they will have a this, they will have a that, and so it's more like when you're in house, you have like a folder and subfolders for your clients, and
Right.
some of these matters might never end. So I don't even necessarily categorize some things as matters because they're not like a one and done type thing. Like a closing, that might be more like a matter, right? Like a transactional
Yeah.
closing.
I have I kind of have it set up like 5 different, major, you have a corporate folder, you have an insurance folder, you have an HR folder, an ops folder, and you kind of have those standard matters that exist no matter what. And then you open other matters as like little things pop up that are kind of, one-off things that you want to track. I don't really, I mean, from an accounting from my standpoint, I don't necessarily care that much,
Right.
you know, whether it gets tracked down to that level. Some of the clients want to see it. Most don't care. That's an interesting thing. Like when you get a lot of do you get any clients who are asking you for backup billing, like
No.
hours to see where you're at?
No. In fact, there's a handful of institutional clients that I have, though I'd say most of my clients are not, they've never hired a lawyer before,
Yeah.
small business or individual people, or if they had, it was because they had no other choice.
Right.
So the institutional business clients, I had somebody in like one client in their accounting department like asked for my bill, and I was like, "There's one invoice, and it says that it's recurring, and it was the first
Yeah.
invoice that was paid, and then it's
Yeah.
automated through the system, so I could show you the receipts for payments, but I don't actually invoice anymore because it's an ongoing subscription." And then I never heard from that person again because they do hire a lot of law firms for different things, and the
Yeah.
reason they hired me is because of the simplicity of it, and
Yeah.
and and I just handle day to day things for this client, and they hire big giant law firms for all the other things that they're doing, because there's power to those brands, right? So
Yeah.
there's still going to be a reason to hire a giant law firm.
Oh yeah.
um
They
yeah,
exist for a reason and they will always exist.
yeah, but to handle, a random employee got sued and they shouldn't have been, or go over this termination agreement for this particular jurisdiction, like little things like that, why should I pay $1,000 an hour for something like that,
You
right?
should not.
So so no, like the whole reason they've hired me is because they're not expecting that at all.
Yeah.
And attorneys who still do that, I'm like, you got to move your clients away from that because it's still taking you time away from your productive day to do business development, building
Yeah.
automations, or doing the legal work, right? And it's just, get away from it, which makes me wonder, what were you doing for like documents? Like, did you subscribe to document databases? Did you use any automation tools? Were you using the paper on the
Yeah.
other side mostly? Like, what were you doing when you were getting
Yeah. At
started?
that point, I didn't have any automation. I hadn't acquired any automation tools. I was using, I mean, I bought a Lexus subscription very early on. I knew I needed it. And Lexus Advanced, their business forms are great.
Right.
They're really good forms. And I had, I mean, I had, 20 some years of practice, wasn't always practicing, but I was practicing for 20 years. I had everything, right? I had a lot of my own forms already built out.
Right.
The advantage of, being in-house in the cable company for 6 years, I had great forms from that, right? I love the general counsel was really good. And we built out a really great set of forms. I still had them, right? I used them all the way through my company
Right.
and tweaked them and built them along the way. So I had a pretty good set of stuff to start out, and anything I didn't have, I was getting from Lexus. And, you start calling on, old friends from law school. Hey, did you ever done one of these? Yeah, hold on. I'm gonna shoot you something. You just kind of build up if you just build your, I was using Dropbox and build up a nice form set.
Yep.
And, now I obviously have a lot more access with OGC solutions because they've been around a long time and we have a lot of forms. We
Right.
pretty much, like, can't think of something we haven't seen, but you never know.
Yeah, I mean, and even a company that size using Salesforce, I almost feel like it's a pretty small company to be using
Yeah.
Salesforce. So
We
just
we are we are I would say we're definitely not we're trying to push the technology piece
yeah,
to the next level. So we're starting to bring in the right AI tools on top of it. The advantage is, there's a lot of stuff built on the Salesforce platform.
yeah,
It's kind of, yeah, it's clunky with Salesforce, and it can be clunky because they're allowed to be, because they're the big behemoth. But there's some interesting things with it. I mean, I don't know that, like every platform, there's, you can look at it and be like, oh, I could do something a whole lot better. Sure. Do you want to spend the money to do it?
right, right. That's the problem. That's the always ongoing problem, which is why I'm excited.
Yeah.
Like tomorrow is Tech Show for those who are in or around Chicago or coming in for ABA Tech Show. So we'll see I think every
Yeah.
single exhibitor is now, it's mandatory that they have some kind of AI feature that they're promoting with their tool too.
Or at least they say they do.
Right. I've definitely demoed some tools that even have AI in the business name, like for legal tech.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there is nothing AI
There's
about
no
this.
AI in this.
It's like, well, it's on our
Just,
product roadmap. And I'm
yeah.
like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
Yeah. And I am and then on the other hand, I'm demoing some amazing AI tools that are all in on
Yeah.
AI. So I've seen both sides of it, but very excited for that. And any other technology that comes to mind that's worth mentioning, whether it's stuff you're using now or things along the way that helped you, reduce time you're spending on client files so you can maximize, revenue with less time and all
No,
that.
to me, it really is like you could find any kind of tools you want. Really, you just have to build. It's really your workflow that makes sense. I would say I thought Reality was really onto something on the front end onboarding piece of it, which was really interesting because you could build out these questionnaires. You could do it in Google Forms, right, or
Right.
a Jot form. That I think is something that any solo should be doing. Google Forms, Jot form, they're easy to use. Jot form is better than Google, in my opinion, just because it's a little more secure and the database is nicer in terms of where you can put the data. And it's not complex at all. It's easy to build, easy form builders. But to build out things like, hey, you want to onboard somebody, that's the stuff that like it just kills you from an administrative standpoint, is getting all that information in, how you're going to plug it in, where's it going to go, getting your letter set up and having a good retainer letter and, your engagement letter set up so that you actually have this stuff ready to go and fillable and just touching buttons to do it. That's huge, right? If you can get to there, and build it out right now, I don't know of anybody that, like, I can't just say, hey, use this piece of software. It's kind of everybody, I think we're all kind of just glitched together. I've been looking at, maybe building something on the front end, like kind of like what Rally was doing, but I have some other thoughts on it. That's something that I think would be an interesting piece of software.
Yeah, yeah. The longtime listeners know, sponsor of the show, Gavel, is like a legal tech solution that does a version
Okay.
of this. So they used to be Documate. Maybe you've heard of Documate because Documate was around a lot longer. They rebranded
Yeah.
as Gavel. And the reason they rebranded is because they do so much more than just document automation.
Right.
So they could do the intake stuff. They could do all that. And then once you capture that data from your client or prospective client, now it could populate these documents if you set up the automation. And it does require a little bit of that. I'm gonna have the founder back on the show to talk about how they're integrating generative AI, which they are legitimately integrating generative AI into building document automations. Um,
Yeah.
because it's still tedious to like go in and do all the if this then that then this clause then that clause,
Yeah.
put it here, put it there. It does take time, and it's not like it for building automations for legal documents. I think it does require a legal mind, but you have to be comfortable going in and doing those things. So with Gen AI, I believe they're like trying to reduce the friction of setting up those automations because you use
Yeah.
natural language then instead of if this then that logic to build those out. And also listen at this point, and the listeners have heard the commercial, but just as a reminder, Law Subscribed saves you 10% if you sign up for an annual subscription with Gavel.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, no, that
so
sounds interesting. I'd like to check it out. Yeah.
yeah, definitely check it out.
Yeah.
And save your 10% by using the code Law Subscribed. So promoting my show sponsors aside, we're getting close on time here. I want to be respectful of your time. So a few more questions are, how did you handle, and maybe how are you handling multi-jurisdictional practice? Because especially when it's just fractional general counsel, you're not going to court. Different lawyers have different opinions, how comfortable they are doing things like that are all completely taking place outside your jurisdiction. So, if it's federal law, I guess you could do it, but like, how did you handle that?
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty comfortable that, usually representing, I mean, look, 90% of the time you're representing a Delaware entity and I'm not a Delaware lawyer.
Right.
So, I have very little issue with, representing clients across jurisdictions on corporate matters, and if the matter was an employment issue or something that needed local, I would find a local counsel to do it, and get advice, right? Or just bring them in. Luckily now with part of the reason why I merged the firm, we have 20 attorneys. We have people licensed across the country, not all 50 states, but we have a lot of states covered at this point.
Right.
You feel really, your comfort level goes up a lot more. I'd say it's definitely an issue that the Bar Association needs to deal with and should have dealt with it years ago.
Yeah.
These ridiculous rules that well, if you're in-house, you could practice in this state, but you need to get a waiver and blah, blah, blah. It's like, I think I get it for going to court and you need to know local rules, but from a corporate standpoint and a contractual standpoint and day-to-day general counsel kind of work, I'm not saying I push the boundaries, but
Yeah.
I think multi-jurisdictional practice is just, it's natural and it's part of what you have to do.
Yeah, it's one of these things where I think the proposals for some changes that I've seen say you just have to advise your client that you're not licensed in their specific jurisdiction, and as long as they understand and accept that then it's okay. Like that's, I think, some of the proposed changes to the model rules have said some version of that.
Yeah,
So kind of as long as you're doing that right now, look, there's no legal ethics provided on this podcast,
exactly.
but
Yeah.
it's like one of these things. It's like disclose, right? Make sure
Yeah.
it's reasonable. Make sure you disclose and all that. And
Yeah. I
it's
mean,
just- yeah,
any of us that have been practicing for any period of time, when you're over your skis.
yeah,
And if you're not smart enough to know when you're over your skis, then you shouldn't be you shouldn't be general counsel anyway. Like, honestly, if you can't recognize those things, that's the whole idea of a general counsel, is recognizing when you are out of your element and you need to get some support. So,
Yes.
when I go there, I go for support.
Yes. Last substantive question I'd like to ask you, and let me know if you have a hard stop at the top of the hour, is how you priced it. Maybe even how you're currently pricing it, and you don't have to give away prices change, but like, do you have set prices, tiers that they could go up? Do you have custom pricing?
Yeah, I'm not using any tiers or set pricing. I price based on, I do some due diligence on the front end and at the initial meeting. And then I ask for some documents. I ask for handbooks and some other corporate documents and some things. And I know immediately where the company is. I can tell where they are in their maturation scale. And through that, I can price accordingly. I've never been wrong, knock on wood, to date. One client, I actually lowered their price. I never had to raise anybody's price.
Mm-hmm.
I lowered a price because I realized that they were more mature than I thought they were, or really they just weren't. They didn't need as much support as I thought they would.
Yeah. Gosh, you don't hear that a lot. Attorneys lowering their prices for their clients.
Yeah.
It does come up on the podcast because, when you think about it long term, you want to keep representing this client.
Yeah, I'd rather keep them around than you don't want to get to 6 months and they say, why have we been paying this guy? He's not doing anything. And then they cut you off completely. Rather call them proactively and say, hey, it doesn't look like you're using them that much service. I think we should drop your price down. I still think there's a lot of value that I can add here. Let's see if this works.
Yeah. So the last question I'm going to ask you is a question I ask all my guests and why people stick around to the end of the show. And that is a hot dog a sandwich and why?
Oh, it's a hot dog a sandwich. I don't eat hot dogs, but yeah, I believe it is a sandwich.
Why?
It is meat within two pieces of bread. Accordingly, it's a sandwich to me, and you can put condiments on it and other stuff.
Okay. All right. And did you say you're in Philadelphia or where are you?
Yeah, yeah, I'm in the
So
Philly area,
you're in the Philly area. So is a Philly cheesesteak a sandwich?
100%.
Okay. Okay. You said that so confidently. I don't need an explanation as to why.
That's right.
If people wanted to follow up with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
You could find me marksnyderman.com is easy. On the OGC Solutions website, ogcsolutions.com, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok, at Marc Snyderman. I'm pretty much ubiquitous everywhere.
Yeah, and that's Mark with a C for those
It is
who
Mark with
didn't
a C. That is
who
correct.
didn't if you didn't actually read the name of the podcast that has his name in it. It's Mark with a C.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for coming on the show.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
And that's our show. Thanks again to 650 and Gavel for being sponsors. The best way for others to discover this show is for you to share it with somebody you think would find value from it. Follow me on LinkedIn, since that's where I'm most active on social media, and click the bell towards the top right of my profile to get notified about all of my posts about this podcast and everything else I think is valuable for you to see. To get in touch, message me on LinkedIn or email kurbis@lawsubscribed.com. All links are in the show notes. Until next time, this is Matthew Kurbis with Law Subscribed.